In this video, we're going to discuss an advanced method of using the UX component from Alpha Anywhere to take care of the editing or additions of events inside of a scheduler. So in this case, we're going to show we got a scheduler running here. And if we look at this, we can open up, and this is actually a UX component. As you can see, I have on the debugging, so I can look at that. I have my controls on here, and if I were to make a change to this event, which right now says 2-day or 2 all day here now, and just take that out of there and submit this, we'll see that the scheduler updated and it everything took place, and we did a refresh of the scheduler itself. So now we're going to see how this was defined. And the heart of the matter is inside of the after post initialization area on your user defined scheduler customization, we have some code, and we're attaching an event to the on before light box. This is going to prevent the light box. It's going to intercept before the light box actually opens, and this function is always passed in an ID, which is the ID of the event. And of course you can add anything in here that you would like. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm using an alpha function which is called create window, and I'm using it to open up a window that's going to display the UX component. And all this code down through here is just defining how this window is working, and I'll show in a second how we got all that code. We let Alpha generate it for us, and then all we did was we made a few additions to it. So let's jump over here to the UX component that we used, and we'll see how it was defined. And we just have the this is a very basic example, of course. I just have the ID and the subject ending date and starting date on this particular component. I probably want to actually move that up to start date. Not start date, then end date. So we got this component set up, and we set up the data binding, and I set up the data binding to the actual table that I'm using. So I'm letting the UX do the writes back to the database. This is all just standard A5 stuff. On this control, on the server side event, where on the on-dialog initialize event, this is where we're going to load in the information from the scheduler gets passed in, which is the ID, and I'm checking to see if the ID is available, and if it is, then I'm going to go ahead and run this action, and this action is set up to look for, it's going to read from a variable, and it's looking for ID. So we got that taken care of. If it doesn't exist, then it's not going to do a new, it's not going to try and load it, and you can then enter a new event. Then on the after dialog validate event, we're just running the normal save data back. The only difference here is to get the scheduler to refresh, we have inside here a little bit of code, and it's just saying if the window parent scheduler, which is a variable, exists, then we're going to call this scheduler.clearAll function, which is going to clear the events from the scheduler and do a refresh. That's how we're refreshing the data. Now, how we got the code for the actual opening the window that we're going to load this page in, or this component in that's on a page. And of course we did have to save this. We saved this to a web page. But on this same component. I just have a button, and this button is where I use to define the code to get my window. And the action JavaScript that we're using is open A5W page static, this one here. And if we look at this action, I put in the URL that I'm going to use, which is my UX edit A5W, and I'm going to have the ID equal to the ID. So I set that all up. I called things the names I wanted them to be. I set the type of window. You can set your sub-themes here. I made this one dock to the bottom. I gave it a title, told it to show it, set up some other things down through here, turned on animation, stuck in some window buttons, turned on the optional parts in case I wanted them, and down in the on-hide event, we also just put in a place in case I wanted to use that, so I just added a placeholder. So if we look at the JavaScript for this, and we go down to the global declarations, we ignore this first part, because this is just setting up the variable and doing some checking for making sure it's not running on a desktop. But this is the function that actually is what I copied over and then modified for my own use. And as you can see, it's very similar to what we had in the builder. And I'm going to bring up Notepad and and inside Notepad++, I have on the function that I'm actually running right now. And if we kind of compare these a little bit, you can see what I did is I changed some of the naming for my own use, and I left a lot of this the same. I did set the width to a blank value so that it would auto size, and I made the height to suit the component that I'm using. I changed the title to what I wanted, and then down at the bottom, and let's go down here to the bottom, what we did here was we just made a little bit of a change, whereas we're in this particular one, they're just showing ID equals ID, which is the way I defined it, so that I would have my placeholder and know how to call it. Inside my actual component, I changed that a little bit, and I changed the source to the ID equals, and then I added in the JavaScript variable ID, which is being passed in from this function at the top right here. So I have access to that, and that's the actual ID of the event. So when the ID of the event gets passed in, the UX component knows to load it. If it doesn't get passed in, or if it's blank, then the UX component knows not to load it. So you won't get an error message if you're looking at this UX component in say live preview. So we don't get any error messages there. So I hope that explains how to do that. There's a lot of other things, of course, we could do. In here, we could actually, instead of making the UX component do the saves, we could handle all of the updates inside the scheduler on client side and then call a scheduler function to update the event and do the callback from there. But this will get you started on how to use a UX component. Thanks.